Terry is under the weather today, so my right hand is not here. But say a prayer for her. We had a second cousin pass away yesterday, and he's more like an uncle to us, I guess. He and my dad and our uncle, they grew up together as brothers, very close, the same age. And he's the kind of person, as he's gotten to heaven, I don't think he's going to be as surprised perhaps as some members of his family were to see that there are some Baptists there. I think he's going to be happy to see his two brothers there and his sister, and they were all Baptists. Maybe there were some members of the family worried about them. Baptists do go to heaven. There was a young Methodist preacher who was learning the ministry, and he was in a quandary. Someone in the neighborhood, a Baptist, had passed away, and he was a Methodist minister, and the family really loved him. He had a good ministry with them in the neighborhood, and they had come to him and asked him if he would preach the funeral for their family member who was a Baptist. He didn't know what to do. So he wrote a letter to his bishop. I've been asked to perform a funeral for a Baptist. What should I do? What can I do? The Methodist minister wrote back a letter. It said simply, bury all Baptists possible. Bury as many as you can. So that's good advice. That was just his perhaps humorous way of saying, well, that's okay. That's okay. You have whatever you have an opportunity to do. I've had wonderful relationships with Methodist ministers and other kinds of ministers wherever I've gone. And sometimes they pastored 2 or 3 different churches. I don't know how they did that. I don't think they were working as hard as I was. And there was one in Vandale that he and his wife both pastored churches. And they were going at it very hard. Seeing a lot of things. Let's look, be sure, we're starting out. Here we go again. Now, if you haven't looked at Bucket's Facebook page or looked at my Facebook page, there are some wonderful pictures there of, there was an orphanage, a children's home, sponsored a Christmas get-together, a banquet, and all those little boys and girls dressed up. I don't know where they got the finery, but they helped them dress up, and they had a banquet, and they're holding Christmas boxes as a part of what was given to them. So we've seen them giving the way in orphanages and villages in places of great poverty. And this, of course, was a wonderful thing. We never had seen it. That those boxes go to a lot of different places that I had not imagined. So Bucket shared that with us. So if you haven't seen those, the faces of those young people are just beaming. Thank you for your generosity in last year. But here we go. We're in January. It's toothbrush and toothpaste time. So when you go shopping, if you can find any of those bargains, pick up a handful. We've already got a pretty good start probably. We have some toothbrushes and toothpaste, and I have no idea. We may even have a really great start. But let's go ahead and stick to the schedule. And if we wind up again, we'll just be getting ready for next year too. But let's stay with the schedule that Andy set up for us and the guidance. And when we've got just more than we really need, we'll let you know. That's a wonderful story in the Old Testament, in the book of Exodus, when they were going to build. God had instructed Moses on the blueprints for the tabernacle. And he said, well, what I want you to do, when they left Egypt, they plundered Egypt. A lot of the Egyptian people just loaded them down with gold and silver and precious stones and valuable things. They said, we're so glad to have y'all go. And when they got ready to build the tabernacle, God told Moses, tell them to bring a lot of that stuff they brought out of Egypt, and we'll melt that down, and we'll use it to build the tabernacle. And then God came to Moses, and he said, tell them that's enough. tell them that's enough. I wonder if any preacher on television has ever said that. We have plenty of donations last year, so you don't have to give any more. Never, I don't think anybody's ever said that. But that's a good story. We'll tell you when we have enough toothbrushes and toothpaste. But let's start that ministry. That's a good ministry. Things are already well underway. I received my notification yesterday from Phil about the men's conference. It's going to be on the 16th and 17th. Mike Pence is going to be there. David Jeremiah is going to be there. Rick Burgess. You know, last year we were going to have somebody and they died. So you never know. And so Phil is saying here's some people going to be there. So we just go, since it's in Huntsville, we just drive there on Friday night and come back and buy a ticket at the door. I think the year before last, there was somebody out front hawking free tickets, and they were trying to give them away, and Danny and I got in free. I'm not promising that, but if you'll go to eat with us at the Krusty Krab, then we always eat free there. You can go there with us. Men's conference, the weekend of Father's Day. So go to that if you can. If you can't go and you know somebody that ought to go or needs to go, then tell them you'll pay their way. Of course, leading the worship, help me with his name, gentlemen. Mike Billingsley. Charles. That's his brother. Yeah. Charles Billingsley always does a great job. All he does, though, is he makes us stand up a lot, or he tries to. But anyway, we have to sing standing up. Well, lots of things planned for 2023. Who knows what will happen and what the Lord might have in store. I hope you have some plans and some things that you intend, seeds that you hope to plant. All right, let's go on and click that next slide there, Carter. We're still talking about sowing. We're in Mark's Gospel, chapter 4, where Jesus shares the parable of the sower. It's there in Mark's Gospel, chapter 4, starting with verse 1. Let's pick it up, though. I did preach about the elements of the parable of the sower last Sunday, and Jesus said, he was trying to tell his disciples, you have something important to say. God is doing something important, and here are the seeds. But he says, I want you to know that not every seed you plant is going to spring up and bear fruit. A lot of it's going to spring up and won't bear any fruit. He says, this seed planting is kind of tricky. I don't want you to get discouraged. I don't want you to think that everybody you talk to or every person you share with is going to embrace what you have to say. Everybody's not going to like you. Everybody's not going to accept you or what you have to say. This was a very important first parable or teaching for Jesus to share and for his disciples to hear. He says, now look, this farming thing is a little sketchy sometimes. It's a little iffy. But you need to trust God because that's the way it works in the real life. There's the hard ground. There's the stony ground and the thorny ground. And there's the birds of the air. This hot sun. He says you're going to have things kind of against you. This is not going to be an easy ride. But he says, I want you to know that this is the way God's going to do things. It's not just going to tumble in on you, but he says, sow the seed. Sow the seed. Now, we all are very eager. Listen, I love to go out to the garden and gather things in. I love to go out there with a sack and didn't do it this year, but in times past, my father and mother-in-law would put out the word and say, we've got some turnip greens out there in our pasture, out in our garden. And there are some Walmart bags out there on a pole and some scissors. Come on here and just anybody, just get you as much as you want. Well, I remember going out there, getting a pair of Pinkin shears, just get me some greens, take them home, wash them out, cook them up. Terry loves that smell. She just loves it. When are you going to cook some cabbage again? She's always asking me that. I love to go out there with a sack and just gather some things, take it in the house, wash it up, I saw something last night on a clip that somebody took just an ear of corn. It was still in the husk, still had all the grass in it, all the silk was still sticking out of the end. And they didn't even wash that thing off or cut it or trim it or nothing. They just took it, just one ear, and put it in the microwave for 4 minutes. Then they got it out of there, and it was hot, and they had to be careful with it, but they cut the butt end off of that thing, and then grabbed the silk end and just squeezed it. And that ear of corn just shot out of there without any silk on it at all, and it was cooked and done. Now, they said that they were just going to do that, not to prove to us. They were trying to figure out. Someone had told them you could do it, and they didn't believe it. So now I can hardly wait to try that myself. But before you can have corn, you've got to plant corn. And Jesus was saying to them, I'm sending you out. Yes, we'd like to leave that one to the Lord and add this one to our number. And we'd like to baptize that one. We'd like to add this one to the rolls. But he says, it's a lot of seed planting got to go on. Got to plant a lot of stuff before a lot of stuff comes in. And even when you plant lots of seed, then you have to see that God has to bless. And sometimes it may look like you're having a crop failure. He said, that's all right. I just want to kind of get you prepared. Let's go on to the next slide there. We are there. In chapter 4 of Mark, verses 1 through 8, we have the parable of the sower. Now, here in Mark's Gospel, chapter 4, verse 9, Jesus kind of ended the parable of the sower by saying this, he who has ears to hear, let him hear. Now, Jesus says this quite often in the book of Revelation as the Apostle John records the letters to the 7 churches. He that has ears to hear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. Yeah. Now, sometimes when someone is speaking symbolically or metaphorically, you can go over your head and you can be too literalistic. There are some people, I guess, in the world who have been born and don't have ears. I mean, literally don't have ears. That's just some kind of thing that can happen when babies are born. But that's not what Jesus is talking about. And you and I might assume that when Jesus is talking here, he was saying, not everybody in the world who hears what I'm saying, Jesus, that's what he meant. Not everybody who hears what I'm saying is actually hearing what I'm saying.
Put it in my vernacular, they're not tuned in.
That's right. It's like seed that you sowed and it was on hard ground. It's like seed you sowed and was on stony ground. Jesus said, the things that I'm saying, it's like I'm talking to people who don't have ears. You know where people get their ears from? They get their ears from God. And sometimes it's a wonderment. You know, to me, just from my testimony, when I heard the story of Jesus, it was the most wonderful thing I'd ever heard. And everything I've heard about God since then just fell on my ears and in my heart with such joy. Everything when I read in the Bible, when the Lord speaks to me in His Spirit, when I learn about who God is and what He's doing, it's all like treasure that's being stored up in my heart. It's all wondrous. And then sometimes as I sing about it or preach about it or teach it or just share, sometimes I've talked with people who have no interest in it at all. Some people will even tell me, I don't want to hear about that. May I talk with you? May I share my faith with you? And I say, oh no, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to hear about it. I have met people all of my faith life. It has astounded me. They think that what I believe is just nonsense. It's superstition. It's voodoo, hoodoo. It's just miracles and magic. They just look at me like, I can't believe you're so stupid or foolish that you believe that nonsense. And I'm thinking, really? I meet people all the time who they're not concerned about where they're going to spend eternity because they believe when we die, we're just gone. We don't exist anymore. There's no heaven. There's no hell. There's no eternity. There's no God who's watching down on us to see what we're doing. We're not going to see our friends and loved ones, and they're not going to see us. And so, I've discovered, all I could think about when I was in preparation of this message, the first thing I could think of was a dog whistle. Have you ever seen a dog whistle? I used to think that when they did those things on the cartoons, that the dog whistle was really just a contrivance of entertainment on television. But it is an instrument that used to be used quite widely to train dogs. It's a little metal tube, and you blow on it, and it doesn't make any perceptible sound at all. Now, they don't use that anymore. They don't use that to teach dogs to sit or turn around or play dead or fetch or anything. You know why? It hurts their ears. The audible spectrum starts at decibels very low and goes very high. There are some sounds and vibrations of sound so low on that scale that you and I cannot hear it as a human being. There are some that are so high. That's what a dog whistle is. It's very, very high-pitched sound. And when you're blowing on that, it makes a tremendous sound that dogs can hear, probably other animals too. But this pierces the dog's ears. So they said, no, we don't do that anymore. But that is the illustration that I thought of, is that in my life as a Christian, I've had the opportunity to talk with people and share with them the story of the gospel. And I've seen their eyes filled with tears. And I've seen their face light up. And I could almost hear their heart opening. And I could sense as I was sharing with them that what I was saying was just like gold to them. I've shared with people. I've preached to people that I could just tell that what I was having the privilege of sharing was exactly what they were looking for. And it wasn't because of my intelligence or brightness that it's not that I discovered what that is. It's just that it's what God wanted them to have, what knew that they needed. And I've also talked with people, many, many, many people, who just looked at me like, that doesn't make any sense. I don't care anything about that. That doesn't add up to me. I don't believe that. I don't understand that. It doesn't add up. Let's look at the next slide. But when Jesus was alone, those around him with the 12 asked him about the parable, and he said to them, "To you it has been given to know the mystery of the kingdom of God, but to those who are outside, all things come in parables." He said, it's God's intention for you to hear these parables and understand the message. It's not God's intention for them to understand it at all. It's not just that they're hard-hearted. It's certainly not that they're less intelligent than we are or less spiritual. It's not that we're smarter than they are or we're on a higher level spiritually than they are. It's just that the parables were designed the people whom God had given ears could hear it and say, they could get the truth and the meaning of the parable. But the smartest people in Jesus' day, like the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they could listen to what Jesus was saying and it didn't make any sense to them at all. It's just like he was talking gibberish. He says, so that seeing they may see and not perceive, and hearing they may hear and not understand, lest they should turn and their sins be forgiven. That's a quote of Jesus from Isaiah chapter 6, verses 9 and 10. And he said to them, do you not understand this parable? How then will you understand all the parables? Let's look at the next slide. Previously, we studied Isaiah and the book that Isaiah wrote in the Old Testament. And here in the 6th chapter, God was saying, I need somebody to go to the nation of Israel and preach to them. And Isaiah said, they won't listen. God, they don't want to hear. There's no reason, and they're not going to. It's pointless. Isaiah said, they're not going to listen. Why should somebody go and preach? You want someone, a preacher, to go to the house of Israel and preach your message to them. And he says they are not interested in hearing it. They have no interest at all in hearing what you have to say, God. It's a waste of time. God, he told God that. Let's look at the next slide. Here's the rest of the story. This is from Isaiah 6. And God said, go and tell this people, keep on hearing, but do not understand. Keep on seeing, but do not perceive. Make the heart of this people dull and their ears heavy, and shut their eyes, lest they see with their eyes and hear with their ears and understand with their heart and return and be healed. This was God's way of saying, go anyway. He said, I know they're not going to listen to you. Go ahead and go anyway. That's when Isaiah made those great words. God kind of drew a line here in this chapter, and he says, whom shall I send? Who will go for us? And Isaiah said, here am I. Send me.
Yeah.
I said, okay, I'll go. I'll go. It doesn't sound like a rip-roaring success story, does it? Go tell them. Well, I ain't going to listen. Well, that really don't matter. Go tell them anyway. They're not going to see. They're not going to hear. They have no interest. And Isaiah went and preached. And Isaiah is one of the longest books in the Old Testament. And as far as we know, he didn't change a single mind. He didn't have a single convert. No, not a single person in Isaiah's entire ministry said, hey, I'm going to return to God and I'm going to repent. We don't have any evidence that he had any success at all. And look right here. Let's look at the next slide. And Isaiah said, Lord, how long am I going to preach and teach and talk and share to a bunch of people who don't have ears and don't have eyes? How long? And he said, until the cities are laid waste and without inhabitants, until the houses are without a man, until the land is utterly desolate, until the Lord has removed men far away, and the forsaken places are many in the midst of the land. There's going to be a lot of places that are forsaken. A lot of empty places. How long? Yes, the Lord wants to save. Do you know what is also on his agenda? To condemn. To judge. To judge. His intent, he had already sent other prophets who said, the Babylonians are coming, the Assyrians are coming, the Egyptians are coming. They're going to destroy you. They're going to level the land. They're going to burn everything down. God says, I just want to let you know through the prophets, this was God's intent was not to rescue them. It was to judge them. There's a possibility and always a danger that you or I or anyone we know could get into a place where God has been warning us, where God has been reaching out to us and God has been sending help to us, and we have said no, 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 and we've hardened our hearts, and finally God says, okay. Okay, no more. That's not all that there is. Look what he says in the New Testament. Let's look at this next slide. In 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 9 through 12, it says, a lawless kind of person, the King James Version calls him a man of sin, a sinful, lawless kind of person. A lawless kind of person is coming whose works follow the pattern of the adversary. And every method of wicked deception will fool all of those who are perishing because they refuse to love the truth that could save them. And for this very reason, God will send them a powerful delusion so that they will believe the lie. Does that sound like the God that you know and believe in? That God will send them a strong delusion so that they will believe the lie. If you read Romans chapter 1, and Paul talks about how God judges the ungodly. He says the ungodly who keep saying no to God, ultimately, one of the worst things you could ever hear come from the mouths of God, Paul says, God gave them over.
To a reprobate mind.
God gave them over. God gave up. God just said, okay, this is what you want. This is what you've chosen. This is what you think you need. I'm just going to give you over to that. I'm going to let you have what you want. And that's the worst thing that could ever happen to any human being. For God to give us over. For God to get to a place so that all will be condemned who refuse to believe the truth and delighted in wickedness. There have always been human beings. They loved eating the apple more than they loved refraining from eating the apple. They've always loved forbidden fruit more than obeying a loving God. People who love wickedness more than they love righteousness. And in every case, that person who keeps choosing to say no to God, one day will find that God has said no to them. And not only no, but he says, I'm going to give you something that you will believe in. I'm going to give you something that you do believe in. And it's a lie. I'm going to allow you to be deceived, allow you to deceive yourself, allow for the adversary to fool you and to make your senses dull. And hearing you will not hear, and seeing you will not see. And he says, I'm going to condemn you by giving you what you wanted all along. You just simply delighted in wickedness. You're going to have wickedness, all that you can eat. And you're going to bear the fruit of that. Let's look at the next slide. It is the last slide. Doesn't everyone have ears to hear? No, they don't. Doesn't everyone have eyes to see? No, they don't. You need to understand, you and I need to understand, there are people whom you love, people in your family, people among your friends, who don't care anything at all about your faith, or about Jesus, or about God. They have no time for it. They have no interest in it. They don't feel conviction. They don't feel any guilt about it. They don't feel any lack. They don't feel any loss. They don't think that there's anything missing from their lives. They don't need what you have or what you want them to have. They have no concern at all in what really is the truth. They think they know the truth. But what they believe is the lie. Now we're living in a day, and an age today, if it's different from any other age, in a day where we are in a crisis of truth. I want to see if I can demonstrate this. I don't want to lose you. You know, we have access to so much information these days. But there are people in the world today who will say, here is the truth. Here is the news. And then there are other news organizations that are on the radio and on television. They both are, and they both publish magazines and newspapers, and they're on the radio and they're on television. And this group of journalists are telling you this is the news, this is the truth. But there are other avenues that tell you the exact opposite. Everything they say is different from what these people say. These people say, I'm telling you the truth. These people say, no, we're telling you the truth. They're fake news. No, they're fake news. Do you know there is a, I hesitate to head in this direction. There is a train of thought that is being searched in Google. It is the highest levels of viewership on the YouTube platform and also on Facebook and Instagram. When people are typing in these kinds of questions or researching certain subjects, do you know what most people in the world are investigating right now according to social media? Just guess. What's number one on the list?
Government corruption.
No, that's not it. That's a good one, though. Here it is. I promise this is it. Whether or not the earth is flat.
Yeah.
Really?
Flat earth.
So there's a flat earth society around there.
Well, the Flat Earth Society has been around for 300 years. But it's just now that people are beginning to find out about it because it's the number one search engine. People, when they go to YouTube, more than any other thing they're interested in, politics, religion, how to get better gas knowledge, people are studying flat earth. Let me tell you something. They're not lunatics and insane people. They're not and crazy people. They're scientists, they're doctors, and they're lawyers. They're professors, they're physicists who are saying the earth is not a globe out in space, it's a flat plane. Now, not only that, I love this. I love it. JFK assassination conspiracies, Bigfoot, UFOs, and the whole thing. But this is one that when I want to relax my brain, this is where I go. They have experiments that prove their point of view. They have photographs. They have video. They have affidavits. They have people who get on airlines. They interview astronauts and commercial pilots. And there are thousands of hours of data and information and charts and databases and photos and videos. Not only is the earth really flat, they can prove it. Well, the same people who believe in Bigfoot. They got pictures of Bigfoot. They have little pieces of hair. They have millions of plaster cast footprints of Bigfoot. They can prove. They even have television shows that are on every week called Searching for Bigfoot. I never watch it because how many ever times I watch Searching for Bigfoot, guess what? They never find it. They are out in the woods and they say, what was that? What was that? Did you hear that? I don't know. Did you hear that? It's like those ghost adventures. What was that? What was that? Oh, something touched the back of my neck. And some on the way out there go, ooh. And so, well, that's a Yeti. Let me tell you something. Listen to this. If everything is true, then what?
There's no lie.
Then nothing is true.
Nothing's true.
If you can prove, I was wanting to relax a little bit this morning before I left for church. I got to relax a little bit before I pick up Randy. He gets on my nerves. But, I'm good. I'm relaxing. Have you ever heard of the planet Nibiru? The planet Nibiru. It's another planet in our solar system. It's a great big old fiery ball of iron. And it's in our solar system, and it's heading to this way. It's where the Anunnaki came from many years ago and posed as the Sumerian gods. Well, I watched this. It's about 30 minutes long. The planet Nibiru is actually in its cycle. It's behind our sun right now, and that's why we can't see it. But in just a little while, that thing's going to come out in its cycle, or in its path, and it's going to come out from behind the sun, and we're going to see it. And before long, you'll be able to step outside, and you'll be able to see this big, giant red ball that fills the whole sky, and it's the planet Nibiru. And he says it was on the front of Time magazine in 1961. And people have known, Zechariah Sitchin said Nibiru was coming, and he predicted the date that it was going to show up. They can prove it. They've got photos. They've got telemetry. They've got ancient documents. And they have great big scientists who are saying, yes, there is a planet X. There is a planet Nibiru, and it's on its way here. After a while, you begin to say, you know what? All of this stuff, you know what I think the devil's doing? He's given us so many things. Flying saucers, big feet, leprechauns and fairies, tree sprites, Loch Ness monsters. And today, the difference is it's not just goofy, crazy, insane people, but it's people who have DNA, and they have photographs, and they have videos, and they have proof that everything that they're saying in their presentation is the truth. But if if all that is true, then nothing is true. If all of that is true, then nothing is true. Bigfoot, oh yeah, it's just like Jesus. Two little kids were talking, and one of them said, "Do you believe in the devil?" "Do you believe in the devil?" And the other little boy said, "No, he's just like Santa Claus. It's my daddy." Now, you can watch a flat earth video from beginning to end, and it probably won't convince you to become a flat earther. It never has me. But I'm looking at all that and I'm thinking, gee, that's impressive. And all the people who say they're crazy don't ever come in and refute them. They just give their evidence for a globe. They say, no, here's why the earth. I said, no, let's not talk about why it's a globe. If commercial pilots fly from New York to Japan, you ask a pilot. Now, every 1,500 miles, you've got to adjust. You've got to turn the plane's nose down about 15 degrees for the curvature of the earth, don't you? He said, oh no, we don't do that. What? Why don't you just fly off into space then? Don't you adjust as you go from New York to Tokyo? Don't you adjust for the curvature of the earth? He said, no. Then you talk to an engineer and said, we're going to build a bridge